Hi, hope you're having a good day so far at EDS Reconnect. My name is Jono. I work for Smallfry. We're a strategic design consultancy. I'm here to talk to you today about our approach to innovation and strategy. And this is an approach we call joining the dots. And the reason we do this is that innovation and strategy can be, two quite daunting words that are thrown around within organizations an awful lot. And they're things that I think there's often common misconceptions around just what they are. We'll cover that today, and also about what the best way is to approach these two subjects that, like I've said before, can be a little bit daunting. We'll get into it. About halfway through is going to be a little bit of time where I throw the emphasis back on you guys. So if you have a pen and paper ready for that, that'd be great. Questions, just pop them in the chat as you have been doing, and we can cover those off at the end. A little bit about Smallfry. As I've mentioned, we are a strategic design consultancy, and we don't want to overcomplicate that. That can be, again, one of those terms, one of those words where people don't 100% know what it means, but we like to think that we just turn good ideas into great products and services. Obviously in collaboration, close collaboration with our partners. Like I've mentioned already, what you're seeing today is going to be a little bit of an overview into our approach to that, our kind of ethos, I guess. And further down the line, we'll cover off some sort of case studies as well. The reasons we believe joining the dots of innovation is a really impactful way to approach both innovation and strategy. So when talking about these subjects, and like I said before, we're going to define a little bit more what innovation is. I think a really nice way to start is by talking about essentially what innovation is not. And you'll learn quite quickly as we go along that I like a quote. So you'll see some quotes popping up in just a sec. So the first thing to understand from our point of view is that innovation is not just problem solving. Absolutely, problem solving has a massive part to play in design, in engineering, in development, but innovation is not going to be as impactful as it could be if all we're doing is constantly solving the last problem to arise. We like to liken it to kind of driving the car with just looking in the rearview mirror. If you're constantly basing your next action on feedback or something that's happened in the past, you won't ultimately get where you need to go. The rearview mirror has lots of useful information for driving, but it's not going to get you to your destination. Okay, and like I said, a good quote that I think sums this up nicely is that of Steve Jobs. He says, you can't just ask customers what they want and then try to give that to them. By the time you get it built, they'll want something new. And I think that's perfect. This exactly sums up what I'm talking about here. That's why I love quotes so much. Why should I spend the time trying to come up with an eloquent way of putting things if someone's already done it for me? So another definition of innovation that we like to cover off with our clients and that sums up our approach is that innovation is not just new ideas either. I think there's a common misconception that innovation comes from just sticking sort of, really clever people in some sparse white room, and as a result, they'll have some kind of moment of inspiration, and that's innovation, it's done. That's absolutely not the case. And I think this is best summed up by a quote from Thomas Edison. So Edison says the value of an idea lies in the using of it, and again, I think that's perfect. When you think about Edison and his legacy and the famous rivalry with Tesla at the time, I think Edison is really your archetypal innovator, while Tesla is more of your stereotypical inventor. When you think of their legacy, Edison goes down with more than twice as many patents to his name, massive inventions like the light bulb, film, things like this, because he understood, that the value of his ideas were in realizing them and commercializing them, while Tesla, went down in history as a little bit more of, like I say, that kind of stereotypical mad inventor. So to summarize those 2 points, I think innovation really for us, and why I talk about innovation and strategy so much, my role is as an innovation strategy lead for our consultancy. And I think those two things, you can't have one without the other. So innovation for us, the definition is it's strategic. absolutely. It's holistic, like I mentioned earlier. You can't just rely on one source of information, your rearview mirror. You can't just rely on that. It's all encompassing. And with those two things in mind, that's how you achieve impactful innovation. Like I said earlier, if you're looking in the rearview mirror or you're just solving today's problems, you're not going to have the impact that true innovation sort of warrants, I suppose, or is striving towards. So that for us is why innovation is strategic, holistic, and impactful. And to sum that up nicely with another quote again, this is from Andrew Hagden. He's a professor, author on entrepreneurship and innovation. He says innovation is about connecting, not inventing. No idea will make a difference without building around it the networks that will support it as it grows and the network partners with which it will ultimately flourish. And I think that's, that's exactly what we're trying to say here today. It's a perfect introduction, really, to the webinar. Innovation is about connecting, not inventing. Great. So as I've already mentioned, my role is as an innovation strategist with Smallfry. We work with partners to realize what their goals are, realize their vision, and help them create the strategies that will achieve that. Very similar to that Andrew Hagden quote. We're here to build networks, build partnerships, and really flesh out ideas so that they are as impactful as they can be. Therefore, innovation requires strategy. Those two things go absolutely hand in hand. You can't really have one without the other. And that looks a little bit like this. So it's a super simplified diagram, of course. I'm sure you've seen many process maps in your time. But for us, really simple way of approaching it is something like this. Actually, when I was in one of my old roles, we were pitching the idea of building an innovation team internally at this brand. And this was the exact diagram we used to showcase to the board. And the metaphor I used at that time was that it was like the Big Bang. And that might be a bit grand or a bit over the top, but stick with me and you'll see what I mean. So in any organization of any size, or any network of any size, there are often these ingredients that are floating around, a little bit like the rocks inspection. They're floating around, doing their own thing. Every so often they'll collide, but really not doing anything too useful other than occupying space, occupying time. And then came the Big Bang, which brought these things together, brought these elements together. And, this is the moment where some organizations might shy away from innovation. Innovation can be chaotic and it can be messy, but it's worthwhile because the reaction that you get out the back end is a nicely ordered and structured approach to achieving your goals. Everything is moving in the right direction. As the result of the Big Bang, everything is in its place as it should be, and constantly expanding and growing. Now, the Big Bang is, it's what people say, oh, well, that's a one-off. That's something totally unpredictable. None of us could have seen coming. So how do you achieve innovation strategy consistently? So if the Big Bang is too grand for you as a metaphor, let's use the metaphor of a chemical reaction. I think this is something where you can study the ingredients closely to ensure that what you mix up produces the reaction that you're looking for. Okay, and that's where we get this idea of joining the dots. You see these ingredients on the left-hand side of the page. We'll explore these in a little bit more detail. So these ingredients exist obviously within your own organization, but as I mentioned previously, also exist outside in parallel organizations or possible collaborators that you could be working with. So, these kind of ingredients include internally, it might be you've got, that client feedback that we mentioned earlier. You might have a mission statement, you might have your vision, you might have certain goals, certain KPIs. And, externally, that might look like a supplier that you need to access to reach those innovation goals. It could look like manufacturing support. It could look like a creative industry, agency that's got that kind of creative spark you're looking for. Equally, it could like academic research, something outside of your organization that's going to add. That's what those grey dots are. They're things that exist outside of your organization that obviously don't exist in this diagram in the organization in the center. So then innovation, like I've mentioned already, comes from joining the dots. This is starting to look a lot like a chemical reaction now. I'm sure you can see that. So this is where you start to draw lines between your teams and external teams and say, look, we need to work. This person and we need that access to that ingredient to achieve the reaction that we're looking for. And that's why we believe innovation comes from systems thinking. So systems thinking is a term some of you might be familiar with, but essentially it's all about collaboration, and it's all about, as I've mentioned previously, joining the dots of innovation, looking outside of your organization and achieving things together. If you think about the sort of common themes or common issues, I suppose, that we're trying to tackle as an industry or cross industry, sustainability, the climate crisis, these aren't things that one industry is going to solve, let alone one organization. These are the kind of global problems that require systems thinking at a really high level, really, to achieve any kind of meaningful and impactful innovation. And again, I've got one of my favorite quotes. So this is Indy Joe Iser. He's one of these thought leaders in systems thinking, really, and he says that the biggest revolutions of the 21st century will not be the technologies. Instead, it will be about us and how we organize ourselves at scale to affect systems. And I think this is the kind of central challenge that we face. And for me, this is our revolution. This is how we start to make those big shifts. So, as I've mentioned, innovation is often born from challenge, diversity, and like I said, the challenges that we are facing right now are huge. So the only way we can achieve those is through collaboration, systems thinking at a major scale. So we're going to look at some case studies now, not at such a big scale, but this just gives you a little bit of a flavour of kind of how this systems thinking can be approached. And these are some examples of where it's been really impactful for the businesses and the products in question. So first one, my background is actually in the apparel, footwear, sportswear. So I can't go on presentation without talking about at least one innovation from that space. So the first one we've got a case study from Speedo. So sorry, it looks like my slides are a little bit outdated here. So I'll talk you through the Speedo example myself. So Speedo were looking for ways to sort of continue their domination within the pool. They used this approach of systems thinking. They thought, who else is having this same problem that we're having? And so they looked outside their organization for a solution. Their problem, was getting people through water quickly. Hydrodynamicism, they said, who else outside of our industry is facing the same problem? And they opened it up an open innovation platform. So open innovation is, again, a term some people will be familiar with, and it can mean a whole host of things, really, but essentially it's a systems thinking term. Innovation that comes from opening your doors, opening your labs, and sharing resource and engaging in knowledge transfer. And that's exactly what Speedo did. They had met with a whole host of people, like I say, from across multiple industries. And the final solution they took was actually from a paint provider. So the paint provider was providing paint for cruise ships, cargo ships, where, milligrams and milliseconds and sort of tiny improvements in efficiency resulted in massive savings in terms of fuel and speed. So what they were doing was they were making their paint with the same micro structure as a shark scale. And this is the most hydrodynamic shape. Evolution has had years to develop this shape, millennia to develop this shape, and it is the fastest shape through water. And so Speedo took this and they laser printed this shape into their swimsuits. And that summer at the Beijing Olympics, they smashed almost every record in the pool. Great mark of innovation is when your innovation is so successful. I think it ultimately got banned for being unfair as an advantage. So I think that goes to show how opening your doors and opening your mind to new ideas, external approaches can prove absolutely massive in terms of the benefits for your organization and for the product that you're trying to develop or the service you're trying to offer, whatever it might be. Similarly, another case that I'd like to talk about that engages this kind of system thinking at a high level is that of BMW. So BMW were looking to improve their iDrive. Well, it wasn't called iDrive at the time. iDrive was the new initiative It's all about how you navigate the sort of infotainment system within the car. And, you know, infotainment systems were getting very complicated at the time. You know, touchscreens were quite naff, were seen as quite unsafe within a car. And so BMW's aim was to make something that was so intuitive, designers could use it without taking, drivers, sorry, could use it without taking their eyes off the road. And they did a bit of research, and again, they looked outside for different approaches to design from what, you know, had previously been a part of the company. It was very small, the interior design, or, you know, the infotainment, the user experience design, as we know it now, was a very small part of their company at the time. And they found that, you know, gaming had led this, had cracked this exact issue almost. You know, anyone who games at any level will tell you, you know, the controls are so intuitive. You don't need to look at your hands. You're looking at the screen, and your hands are, you know, giving really complex commands really easily because the controls are so intuitive. And so this is what born sort of all this UX design, investment in UX designers from BMW. And rather than this being a single, you know, solution, it was a whole different approach to design, a whole area of design they hadn't explored before, and has since, you know, produced the iDrive, which is seen as, you know, one of the best in class, really, in terms of interior and infotainment control. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a flavour around sort of how impactful this approach can be. You know, I think it's the kind of a thing that it sounds bizarre, it sounds challenging, it sounds like it has all these barriers, but if you engage in systems thinking, and if you engage in connecting the dots of innovation by looking outside of your organization, you're going to find ingredients that will make that chemical reaction, you know, much more volatile, much more fruitful, ultimately, for your organization. Great. So now I've talked quite a bit. I'm going to put the onus back to you guys. So as I mentioned earlier, you might need a pen and paper for this. Feel free to do this in your head as well. This is one of my favorite exercises when we talk about strategy and innovation. So like I've mentioned at the start, strategy in particular can be quite a daunting topic for some people, or it can be one of those things where you don't know where to start, you don't know what it entails, and, you know, really it can be made super simple, in my opinion. And, you know, this feeds into what we're here to talk about today, which is joining the dots. So this exercise is called 3 action steps. So you start with your blank piece of paper, and on the far right, I want you to write down a future goal. This could be professional, personal, something you want to achieve in the next 12 to 18 months, let's say. So I'm going to do an example along with you guys. I'm going to say within the next 12 months, I want to buy a house. Right, so I'll give you a second to write that down. Brilliant. So now we should have the far right of our page, a lovely shiny future goal. You know, sometimes these can be quite easy to think of, really. The challenging part is building the strategy and the steps to get there. Okay, so up next, we're going to look at the top of our page, and across the top of our page, we're going to write down some of these internal ingredients. So I'm sure as I've been going along, and, you know, as I presented, you know, this is your organization and here are all the little dots, I'm sure you were thinking of some ingredients that exist in there. So these are all the things within your immediate reach, within your organization, within your circle, whatever it might be, within yourself, that you can apply to achieving this future goal that you have on the far right of your page. You know, so for my example, buying a house, I'm going to say, right, I'm going to put some money into it straight from my, you know, income. I'm going to put it in a savings account, direct debit, set that up. Don't need to worry about that. I might think about, you know, what else can I do within myself? I could have a look at, you know, Rightmove or something like that. I mean, that's getting external now, but I could, you know, I could be stop buying that morning coffee every morning and save that money towards buying my house. Whatever you want, you know, there's a few things you can write along the top, I'm sure. As I've mentioned, you know, it might be the skills you have, it might be that colleague, it might be that equipment that you have in your studio, in your office, whatever it might be, that's going to help you achieve that future goal. Cool. Now, this is where a lot of what we've been talking about comes in today. External ingredients, you know, what outside of your organization, outside of your immediate reach, could you access to achieve that future goal? You know, is that going to be more education? Is it going to be upskilling? Is it going to be access to manufacturing, access to an equipment, access to creative agency, access to whatever it might be that's going to help you achieve that future goal? my example of buying a house, I'm going to approach a mortgage broker for advice here. Okay. So then what we do next is we write 3 action steps, as the name of the exercise might give you a clue. So we're going to do 3 action steps. So we're going to take ingredients from the top, ingredients from the bottom, we're going to mix them up in the middle, and we're going to have a clear 3-step plan towards achieving this 12 to 18-month goal. You know, the example I've been talking you through as we've gone through this is that of buying a house. So if buying a house is my ultimate goal, and I wrote down, you know, savings account at the top, mortgage broker at the bottom, all these things. So maybe step 1 is to do some research. I'm going to go outside of my immediate reach. I'm going to go on Rightmove, and I'm going to have a little look at how much houses cost in my area. Action 2, again, is going to be access to some external knowledge. I'm going to go and speak to a mortgage broker. I'm going to say, how much do I need to put down as a deposit? How much are you going to offer me? You know, what facilities what finances can I accumulate with your advice, with your help? And then step 3, based on that, I'm going to then start putting money into my savings account. I'm going to know how much to do each month so that I can achieve my goal of buying the house within the next 12 to 18 months. It's as simple as that. So it sounds, often these future goals can sound lofty, they can sound far-fetched. Like I said, innovation can be super inapproachable, but it doesn't need to be. When you take this systems thinking approach and break down the ingredients, those that are immediately available and those that are external, you can really easily sort of start to foresee tangible actions that you can take. And with that in mind, I'm going to ask you what action you're going to take tomorrow. So I'll be perfectly happy if you leave this talk and just one of you sort of does something different tomorrow than you did today. And I think the action plan that you've got right there on your piece of paper is going to be great fuel for that. Cool. So now we're into sort of the second half of the webinar. I'm going to try and, you know, speed to this a little bit because, you know, I know that we've took a lot of time in that front part, you know, breaking down these terms, innovation and strategy, joining the dots, systems thinking. You know, I think there's a lot to think about there. And though there is a lot to think about, I think we need to remember the power of a catalyst. So I mentioned earlier that innovation strategy can be viewed as a chemical reaction. And absolutely, I think that sums it up really nicely, that slide that we had, the diagram. And a catalyst, for those who remember any of their chemistry from school, is something that really facilitates chemical reactions, accelerates them, in fact. And, you know, I think what I'm trying to say here is that Smallfry, you know, we have the facilities to be your catalyst, for sure. You know, when it comes to those external ingredients and partners and networks you want to build, if you're looking for someone who's done this before, if you're looking for just where to start, you know, you can see our list of services on the board. We do handle kind of everything from innovation strategy through to design for manufacture. Obviously, what we're here to talk about today is innovation and strategy. And to give you a bit more of an idea, I think our positioning as an external consultant, as coaches, as strategists, I think it gives us a really unique perspective in allowing us to support innovation strategy. And we do that in a few different ways. And they're on the board now. So we've got cross-industry innovation, human-centered design, and this outside-in approach. Now, these are by no means exhaustive in terms of our approaches and the way that we might handle collaboration. But I think these are the 3 things I'd like to really highlight today, because they are the common kind of barriers or maybe the least immediate thoughts in the minds of most people we've worked with when it comes to adopting systems thinking. But equally, they have been many times the most fruitful. And I'll show you what I mean in just a sec. So starting with that first one there, cross-industry innovation, we've already looked at Speedo and a couple of the case studies outside of our portfolio. But to give you an idea of some things we have worked on, Quanta and Metrosent are 2 of our case studies within the medical industry. And Quanta is a home dialysis machine. And then the core technology that we used to revolutionize really home dialysis came from the drinks industry. We understood that the problem that the user has is the reusability of home dialysis. So, you know, before Quanta made this device. There was only the option to have home dialysis once a day, twice a day, maximum. But it was an extensive sort of cleaning process, and any other time you would have to go to dialysis at the hospital. Similarly, we took this approach of, what technologies out there facilitate this cleaning process in a much quicker way. And the one that we discovered was from the drinks industry. And the guys were working with at Quanta at the time, they said that they shared the feedback that, it's the kind of thing they wouldn't have thought of looking at, because they were just trying, they're so confined to, I guess, your own horizon. They hadn't engaged in systems thinking, and they were missing this soul that made the machine so much more user friendly. I mean, some of the stories from the people we interviewed and the focus groups we ran, one of the girls, she's a surfer. And as a result of this, now she can take this dialysis machine with her anywhere, use it the full 4 times a day that she needs. She no longer needs to worry where the nearest hospital is when she's traveling and when she's surfing and competing. It's brilliant, really, the change that's brought to her life. Really cool, also similarly impactful collaboration came from with Metrosens. So Metrosens were developing, had this technology, that was being used with the MOD, which is the passive magnetic field for detection of submarines, that allows you to detect submarines without being detected yourself. We found we've been doing case studies, we've been working and collaborating in the medical industry for some time, and we knew that one of the barriers they had in terms of electromagnetic fields was anything operating around the MRI machine. And so Metrosens developed their technology into something usable in that sort of environment, whereby it would detect metal, stop metal from getting inside the MRI room. Because anyone who works in the medical industry will tell you any kind of metal inside the MRI room is a cause of potential disaster, essentially. Again, taking that technology and applying it in a totally different manner proved really fruitful, really beneficial for all involved. I'll whiz you through sort of the larger scale pictures of those 2 devices I've just talked about. And if you want to talk more about them, you can look at the case studies on our website, for example. There we go. So another approach we pride ourselves on is this of human-centered design. Oftentimes working with clients, we know that clients will tend to prioritize traditional business KPIs. So one of the structures I love to use when we're talking about innovation and strategy with our clients is that of desirability, feasibility, and viability, and trying to sort of, equally weigh up those 3 things. Too often at a time, like I said, our clients, our main concern is viability. And we have to take on the role of the consumer to share, kind of more insights into desirability and feasibility. Through our extensive, expertise in customer insight and such, we're able to do this. We've got testimony on the screen there from M&S, for example. They praised our approach to product design being very different, truly customer focused, and invested in concept development. So I think when you consider these things in unison, it's much more valuable of a structure for product development. And then finally, our outside-in approach. Again, this is unique to us as a consultancy. We're able to come in as an external partner and remain completely objective in the face of kind of new information. Our skill set across the spectrum of design and development helps to kind of deliver insights and strategies that are quite impactful, really. And you can see feedback here from Keys Group. So Keys Group are actually a care provider who we've worked with for some time now, to really look at their problems around kind of culture, organizational culture, and strategy of how they develop and deliver their service. What was really impactful in terms of feedback, actually, well, we learned that they really valued our approach, because we were saying things that they kind of knew were wrong or already were aware of, but having it fed back to you by an impartial third party who are also offering up ways to go about solving these problems was so much more impactful for them than just having internal individuals from maybe the recruitment team or the HR team, whatever it is, giving that feedback as individuals. So that is the power of a catalyst in systems thinking. And, you know, when we talk about systems thinking, the three things I want you to remember is that, you know, the keys are to build networks. You know, that's something that we pride ourselves on in terms of our approach to systems thinking. And, you know, we've talked a lot about joining dots already today. Understanding humans is fundamental to systems thinking. I know systems sounds like you're removing yourself. It sounds quite logical, sounds quite, you know, above that. But humans ultimately run the systems that we're talking about. That's human desires from the consumer to whoever it is you're trying to interact with, engage with, equally your own organization. Don't forget the humans who operate inside there. And again, like I said, we pride ourselves on that human-centered approach. And then finally, the last thing is to be open-minded to new ideas. You know, systems thinking, as I've mentioned, can be something that is daunting or you know, even scary to start with, to think that the solution for your biggest problem lies outside of your organization. But I think by being open to new ideas, we allow ourselves that capacity to truly innovate. So I'll leave you with one last process, and that is the finite game versus the infinite game. So this is a model that some of you again might be familiar with already, and I think this really nicely sums up some of those three key points that I've been talking about. So a finite game is that of known players, fixed rules, and agreed upon objectives. The example is sort of, you know, most sports are finite games because the objective is to be better than those around you. Joy comes from comparison. You know, I win, you lose, and it's very linear. And this has been, you know, the kind of game that's been driving business and driving innovation, sadly, for years. And that's what's put us in the state we're in now, you know, where our biggest challenges are things like the climate crisis, because, you know, we spent years trying to make things quicker, cheaper, faster, whatever it might be. However, the infinite game is a model that teaches us to appreciate known and unknown players. You know, if one of the main things you can take away from today is that the answer to your biggest problem might lie outside of your organization, then, you know, you're already accepting that there are unknown players here. And to engage with unknown players, you need to admit that the rules are flexible. You need to be open to these new ideas. And the objective is actually to keep the game in play. I think this is fundamental with innovation. You know, innovation is never finished. Innovation is about continuous improvement and continuing to grow and continuing to work together to fight these big problems we have. So, you know, like the objectives and the joys from the infinite game comes from advancement, comes from being better than yesterday. It's not so, you know, it's not as ruthless, I suppose. It's not as individualistic as the infinite game. It's more about doing the right thing for the long run. So with those two things in mind, that last process that I've shared with you, I hope that it's clear now just the power that can come to your organization if you want to achieve innovation in its truest form, definitions we spoke about at the start. Then, you know, it is essential that you understand there are dots to be connected here, but it can be as simple as joining the dots. And, you know, I'm going to leave you with the thought of, you know, who are your unknown players? Looking at that infinite game slide, who are the unknown players that are going to help you achieve that innovation that you so desire, that you're seeking, you know? So with that in mind, hopefully you'll be able to be empowered, as I mentioned already, to go on and join the dots. That's my email there on the screen. If anything of that has been sort of interest to you, if there's anything you'd like to discuss more, please feel free to reach out. I'm Jono at Smallfry, as you can see there. We've got a few minutes left, just if there are any questions that have come in. I'll check the chat. So one question I always get is sort of about where to start. People say, you know, well, where do I start? And I think going through the process as we just have there, I think one of the things you can do is always think about looking internally to start with. I think assessing the gaps in your internal knowledge and, you know, being, I guess, open enough and honest enough to know where there are gaps is a massive place to start. I think too often times we can be too proud to admit where there might be shortcomings within our organisation or as individuals, but I think that can be really powerful. The 3 action steps we did earlier is a great exercise to do exactly that. So if that's something that you wanted to do with your teams, I'd encourage that. And equally, if you wanted to reach out, we do facilitate kind of workshops and thought leaders. We can come in and we can do the same talk if you want, or we can do innovation accelerators and innovation weekends. But like I say, my email's down on the screen, and I hope you've enjoyed that. And thanks so much for listening. Take care.